The problem right now that you're seeing with all forms of government is they're strapped for cash, right? Because of everything that's happening with COVID. People need money. And I think you're going to see all the branches of government trying to find as many opportunities to get money. And I think you're going to see municipalities do a lot more bylaw enforcement on this exact thing, which is real estate investors buying and unofficially just making a house into a duplex or a triplex or a quad. I mean, if they're smart, if I was the city, that's what I would do, because that's everybody's turning to real estate right now, right? Like real estate is one of the most hot investment vehicles out there right now in the province, maybe in the country.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking with Ryan from Carson Law about legal non-conforming properties, whether your property actually is legal non-conforming, what that terminology even really means, and what you as a real estate investor need to focus if you're looking at buying, say, a non-purpose built building. And a lot of investors, especially those getting started on their investing journey, like myself when I originally got started, we're often buying converted dwellings. And those often are legal, or maybe sometimes not legal, conforming dwellings. So that's what we're going to be discussing in today's video. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like button, hit subscribe, and let's jump into it.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with our legal expert, Ryan from Carson Law. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, Matt, how are you doing? How are you doing, McKeever Nation?
Awesome. Doing well, and really excited to talk today about kind of like, you know, non-conforming use, legal use, and just everything going around, like, is your multifamily property allowed to be a multifamily property? And I think there's a lot of confusion and disconnect because people want a very paint by numbers system, and they want to understand like one rule across Canada or one rule across the province. But it turns out this is very regional, right, Ryan?
Yeah, you're right, Matt. I mean, and we'll use a particular city as an example. We've got lots of investor clients right now going after rental acquisitions in the Sudbury area and Sudbury and greater surrounding area, I guess. And what I've learned in dealing with a number of those particular investors is kind of the traditional understanding of something can be considered legal non-conforming from a use perspective is not necessarily true of every city and every municipality. Every city and municipality seem to be starting to adopt additional layers of process and fees to get granted legal use and or legal non-conforming use status. So what I mean by that is if we took Hamilton, for example, traditionally, I know with the city of Hamilton, if we can show through statutory declarations and evidence that the property since 1960s been continuously used as a duplex, for example, and the bylaw saying it can't be used as like anything other than a single family residence was enacted in 1970, it means we predate the bylaw and we have continuity of use because it's been the same owner since 1960 and he's sworn a declaration it's always been tenanted as a duplex and he has rent rolls, you know, to support it. So the more evidence you have in paper and so forth to do that typically means boom, away we go. We've got at least legal non-conforming use, so the client can feel somewhat satisfied and comfortable that, you know, they want to buy this as a rental duplex property. They're not going to get bylaw showing up and slapping a non-compliance, and then all of a sudden they can't use it as a duplex, which affects their cash flow and investment strategy on the property, and B, to get it as a duplex, they have to offload more money, you know, to get it to that point, right? And in some cases, it could be pretty substantial. So, so what we found though, so that's like Hamilton and what I would call like more traditional, just city and municipality approach to legal non-conforming use, right? So what we've specifically learned about Sudbury is the city of Sudbury has indicated essentially that is only like step one in a series of several steps to establish legal use as a duplex or legal non-conforming use. So just because you can show continuous possession and use since prior to the bylaw, they throw on all these additional steps and costs that you have to go through to get them to rubber stamp that, yeah, it's a legal duplex or a legal non-conforming duplex, right? So it's like, you know, paying for additional permits to be done, inspections to be done. It's possibly getting an opinion letter from the city of Sudbury, which I think is like somewhere between $500 and $1,000 or something for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these other steps that kind of follow, you know, and I think we're going to see, we haven't come across it yet, but I think we're going to start to see other cities and municipalities doing this. I know that the city of Mississauga and Milton were talking about, because they have a pretty high rental concentration, or a lot of people trying to do these duplexes or accessory basements and all this kind of stuff, kind of, without proper permits or like approvals being taken out.
Yeah.
So I think they're starting to really notice, well, hey, if we could staff for this and enforce this, it's a revenue stream for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the problem right now that you're seeing with all forms of government is they're strapped for cash, right? Because of everything that's happening with COVID. People need money. And I think you're going to see all the branches of government trying to find as many opportunities to get money. And I think you're going to see municipalities do a lot more bylaw enforcement on this exact thing, which is real estate investors buying and unofficially just making a house into a duplex or a triplex or a quad or whatever the case is, right? And they're going to, I mean, if they're smart, if I was the city, that's what I would do, because everybody's turning to real estate right now, right? Like real estate is one of the most hot investment vehicles out there right now in the province, maybe in the country, right? I mean, real estate's always been a huge foundation and piece to building wealth. Like you don't have to read too many educational books and have too many seminars to realize all the millionaires and billionaires in the world have real estate in their portfolio. So real estate has always fundamentally been there, but with interest rates so low on investment opportunities and so forth, it's hard to invest a lot of money in the traditional markets of like RSPs and TFSAs and other types of, registered and unregistered investments. They're just not returning at the same interest rates because the market doesn't have it, right? Unless you go quite risky. So a lot of people are looking at real estate and saying, oh, I can tangibly see the asset. It's right there. And not only do I get, appreciation and equity as a possibility as a return on my investment, not only do I get cash flowing rents if it's that kind of real estate investment, but I also own this property, which, whether it doesn't grow that much in value, which is kind of unheard of, you'll still always have that as well that you can leverage in your portfolio too, right? So, so at the end of the day, that was a pretty long answer to your question, but
no, I appreciate the context. And so just kind of building upon that, seeing how each like region or municipality can kind of dictate its own terms or set of additional rules on top of what already exists. What are some best practices or best approaches for investors? Like if I'm going to, and I know a lot of investors now are looking at markets that they're less familiar with, right? So you mentioned Sudbury is popular. I know we're anecdotally going through the exact same situation with a fourplex now, where it's like, it's all separately metered and they're saying like, oh, but it's not actually conforming. And it seems like there's going to be a bunch of hoops to jump through. What should investors do when they're looking to enter a new market or region? How should they get more familiarized with what those additional layers of rules are?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I think you just have to do your research, right? Like you have to try to contact the city departments or a lot of the city departments have a lot of their information online, which is helpful, especially given, everything happening with COVID and so forth. So that's helpful. But you got to do your research, right? And like if I was working on trying to acquire a bunch of different properties that were multiplexes, I would go on the principle that they're probably not.
Yeah.
They're probably not legally zoned to be what they're used as. I would almost make that my starting point of every acquisition, because it's a pretty good, like if it's a standalone house and it's just all of a sudden got 4 apartment units like carved out of it, that probably was not originally zoned like that, right? It could be, it's certainly possible, but I would go on the basis normally that unless it's like a separate, and you can obviously see like this is like purpose built, 4-unit apartment building, and you can tell the difference. I think, it's pretty easy. But yeah, you got to kind of go in with the attitude of probably it's not approved to be that. So legal non-conforming use is probably what we have to shoot for. And then the question is, just like we use the Sudbury example, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about Sudbury. That's not what I'm trying to say here. I'm just using it as an example, of course, that showing legal non-conforming use in the traditional way is only step 1 for them, saying you can use this as a duplex or a 4-plex, right? And so what talking to the people that manage the building and zoning departments and work in those would be a great place to start too. Like, okay, I'm looking to buy a lot of properties in Sudbury, and I'm trying to get a better sense. I've been reading your website. I've been researching your bylaws. I'm trying to get a better sense to understand, if I'm acquiring a property, what do I need to know and see from the seller to verify that it shows, I can use it as a 4-plex, right?
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, you've got to do like your zoning searches, right? So we typically, with a lot of our investor clients, do like the zoning, building permits, and work order searches, because lots of people don't even know that those exist. So we typically highly recommend, and then if the client says yes, do them, then we do them. The problem is, again, with COVID, that takes twice as long now, and every city's different. Some of them you can order online and get pretty quickly. Others, are all one-off, and they send you a letter, for God's sakes, so that's like 2 weeks to get it. So again, every city's different. I know it's competitive out there, and so sometimes you just gotta go. Like, you can't have a lot of conditions, and you can't take a lot of time and research away, but at least give yourself then enough time in the whole closing process. So like, let's just say the month of June. Let's say on June 1st, you're able to make an offer, but it has to be firm because it's competitive, right? So you can't have conditions or anything like that. And you're not made aware of this opportunity until like May 30th, something, right? So you don't have a lot of time. So you just got to say, we're going in, right? And you want to make sure it's a 4-plex, right? Well, make sure in Section 8 of the Agreement of Purchase and Sale, don't have it just say the use is residential. Have it specifically say that they represent it as a legal 4-plex or a legal non-conforming 4-plex. Like, have them actually put in the representation.
Yeah.
And then have that title search due date as kind of far down the path as you can from like the June 1 offer date, so that if the closing is June 30th, like try to make it like June 20th or something, so that when it gets sent over to us, flag to us right away. Okay, I don't know how much time it's going to take you to order what you need to order from the city, but can you get the file open right away? And then, which we will, and then we'll flag it to say we need to order this off title searches like within a day or two. And then hopefully that leaves us enough time to actually get the stuff back from the city, see what it says, talk to the client before the requisition due date of June 20th in my example. And if we don't like the report, if the report says, oh no, this is like just a single family property, they're totally using it against bylaw and zoning, you either can try to negotiate back like abatement in price, or we can use it as an opportunity to turn around and say, you know, further to your representation in section 10, you either need to abate price, extend closing so we can rectify this, or we're allowed to release out of the deal.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate that perspective. And you actually took my last question from me, which was how does title search kind of play into all this? So really appreciate this. This is very thorough. I think that I think this is one of the best videos we've done and like potentially ever, just because there's so much confusion around this subject matter from investors. And like just one little thing I'm just going to chat about from personal experiences that I've seen a lot of investors struggle with is you'll chat with your lawyer and your lawyer will be like, yep, put in that fourplex use in that section, as you mentioned, because, you know, we want to be as explicit as possible. And then sometimes when you're trying to put an offer in with your realtor, a realtor may give you the perspective that like, oh, let's just put in residential, keep it simple, keep it clean, And there's such a huge disconnect there because the realtor oftentimes, or at least some realtors, are going to be focused on just getting the papers signed. And they want to make sure that the seller signs the papers rather than necessarily focusing on what the buyer's real preference is. And, you know, it's great to be able to go in and go firm cash on the deal if you're that confident in it. But oftentimes the reason you might be confident in it is because you're running the numbers at a fourplex and you need those numbers to work as a fourplex. And the moment it's not, all of a sudden there's a huge disconnect. So yeah, really appreciate this, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, the other thing I would just add just before we wrap up there is, I mean, it's great to like be very specific, like we talked about in section 8 with the use and the representation with the title search and everything. Yeah, it's section 8 or 10. I'm pretty sure it's section 8 and 10. But you could also, if you wanted to be really conservative or, you know, ultra safe, then don't make it a condition so much as a representation in Schedule A. So because a lot of places obviously won't accept conditional offers. But if you just make it a representation of the seller, they represent that this is a legal whatever. And then have it say, and if it is not, then the buyer has the recourse of abatement or rescission of the contract, then nobody can try to argue that the contract doesn't already say that. So that's just something, you know, further to conservatively make it very clear that this is a representation of the seller and you're relying on making your offer that they say it's legal or non-legal conforming, you know, whatever, duplex, quad, whatever.
Yeah, awesome. Really appreciate it. As always, guys, there's a link to Carson Law's contact information in the video description down below. Really encourage you guys to reach out. And it's always important to reach out proactively, right? Far too often people are very reactive when it comes to things like, you know, legal issues or tax issues, but it's so much better to have that initial perspective going into a transaction or a deal, understand what you're really getting yourself into, because especially in this day and age with Canadian real estate, we're dealing with big numbers. And so you want to really have confidence behind what you're doing. So again, really appreciate you jumping on the channel, Ryan, and just sharing your expertise.
Thanks, man.
Thanks again to Ryan from Carson Law for taking the time to shoot this video. I hope you guys got value from it. And we're always trying to provide you guys value on this YouTube channel. So we've actually put together a survey where we'd love to get your input, your feedback, as well as your suggestions for future content, future guests, future segments, the type of content we create, you know, all that stuff. We've created like over 1,000 videos at this point in time. There's thousands of hours of me talking about real estate. And I know you guys still have questions, and I know there's subject matters you still want us to cover, but it feels like we've talked about it all. So let us know, what haven't we talked about in the survey? We'd love your feedback. Let us know. Link in the video description down below. Thanks, guys.